Podcast Queen Production presents PODFIC Theater, A Christmas Wish, written by ASPRIN Forrest, brought to you by the What About Dat team. Chapter 1. Lena Luthor hated winter. She hated the cold, the shorter days, the snow, and most of all, the holidays. Ornaments, sugar plums, multicolored lights, unoriginal music covers, and other Christmas cheer were constantly forced down her throat for an entire month. She had hoped that this issue was just a Metropolis thing, but since moving to National City, she had come to realize just how much Metropolis had been holding back. Even her penthouse apartment and corporate office weren't safe. Illuminated decoration hung from telephone poles, numerous Santas walked the streets, and her secretary, Eve, had been pestering her for weeks with details regarding the office Christmas party. None of Lena's excuses worked because, of course, Lena had no life outside of work. And if anyone knew, that it was the woman who organized her schedule. So when Lena received word that her mother's trial was to be held in the weeks preceding Christmas, and that she was needed to testify, she couldn't help feeling a little relieved.
I need you to clear my schedule,
Lena told Eve as she packed up her things.
Just push them back into the following week.
But Miss Luthor, that's the week of Christmas, Jess replied.
So?
Lena asked, quirking a thin eyebrow. No one will be able to meet. They'll be all with their families, Eve said, tentatively taking a step forward. Honestly, Miss Luthor, with the band you put on Christmasgrams and carolers, you've developed a bit of a Scrooge reputation.
As I told you, Christmasgrams and carolers are nothing but a distraction, and with December already bringing a decrease in productivity, the last thing my employees need are distractions.
Lena couldn't help but sneer slightly as she recalled the obnoxious noise coming from a group of carolers dressed as elves who invaded the lobby of L-Corp a week ago.
And I'm not a Scrooge.
Well, what about the lack of decorations? Every other building is adorned with lights and ribbons, while L-Corp doesn't even have a tree in the lobby.
Why should we waste money on a tree and ornaments we're going to throw out in a few months? Not to mention they are a huge fire risk and get needles everywhere. I thought the staff would be grateful to not have to deal with that.
Miss Luthor, Eve sighed, I think you're missing the point of Christmas.
The point of Christmas is to make money by manipulating people into the notion of purchasing pointless decorations and traditions and buying expensive presents for people they don't really care for.
Lena snapped her laptop shut.
It's capitalism at its finest, and I refuse to take part in it.
Ms. Luthor, Eve took another tentative step forward, so she was up against Lena's desk, holding her digital planner tightly in her hand. Well, you may have a point. Christmas is about spending time with those you love and showing them that you care about them. Lena bit back the urge to scowl at her secretary. Of all people, Eve should know that Lena had no one to care for and no one to care about her in return. The holiday season reminded her of that every single minute of every single day. Turning to look out her office view, Lena gazed upon the bustling city streets of shoppers and Santas and merchants. They all carried gifts and smiles that made Lena's stomach clench. It wasn't fair. Why couldn't she have that? But her secretary had a bit of a point, Lena supposed. And if Lena were to prove that she did have a heart unlike the rest of her family, one of the best ways to do that would be to let her employees off for the week. Forcing others to partake in her bitterness wouldn't make her bitterness any more enjoyable.
Fine,
Lena said, her back still turned towards Eve.
Give them the week off. Schedule all my meetings for January then.
Oh, thank you, Miss Luthor, Eve squealed. They'll be so grateful. I'll go tell them now.
Eve,
Lena called over her shoulder, stopping the excited blonde.
Before you go, could you gather up the upcoming project files? Just leave them there for me, on your desk. Someone has to get some work done this season.
Oh, yes, of course, Miss Luthor, Eve replied, her tone notably more somber. Lena heard the click of her office door closing. Deciding to wait until she was sure that her secretary was gone, Lena moved from the window to the liquor cabinet. She poured a more generous amount of scotch than typical, telling herself that she deserved it, seeing her mother in anything but an orange jumpsuit for years to come. Lena just wanted to be bitter and numb, and the scotch was the only thing that made that possible this time of year. Grimacing through the taste with each swig, Lena finished the glass and gathered the rest of her things. Her flight left in the morning for Metropolis, and she wanted to be sure she looked the best for her mother. Her mother might not care, but Lena still did. Thankfully, her timing had been right, and Eve's desk was empty except for a stack of files. As Lena went to grab it, she noticed a small red box on top of them. On the tag, Lena found her name and nothing else. But she thought it was safe to assume it was from Eve. Resisting the urge to throw it in the trash, Lena carefully opened the box to reveal the contents. A white snowflake Christmas ornament. On closer inspection, she noticed the generic red inscription in the center. May all your Christmas wishes come true. Perhaps it was her bitterness or the recent alcohol, but Lena couldn't help but scoff loudly. She thought back to Eve and her employees and all those children who wanted things for Christmas, the lists and the commercialism, all things a billionaire Luthor like herself could afford and have in a snap of her fingers. But there was one thing that all her money couldn't buy, but everyone else seemed to have.
All I want for Christmas is a family,
Lena said aloud to herself.
And that's never going to happen. So, bah humbug.
She threw the ornament into the trash as she walked towards the elevator. As the doors closed, she considered running back and grabbing it so not to hurt Eve's feelings. But then she realized that this may be the best way to ensure that none of her other employees try to give her gifts either. Besides, she had other things to worry about than a cheesy generic ornament. Little did she know that as soon as she disappeared behind the elevator doors, the ornament in Eve's trash disappeared too. Podcast Queen Production presents PODFIC Theater, A Christmas Wish, written by ASPRIN Forrest, brought to you by the What About Dat team. Chapter 2. Lillian's trial was hell. It really shouldn't have surprised Lena. Her mother had a knack for bringing out the worst in people and souring everything she touched. It only seemed fitting that her lawyer had the same qualities. Lena took the stand braced for verbal assault, and her mother's lawyer gave it to her. Little did he know that Lena knew how to fight back. Her mother had been training her on it her whole life, after all. Lena walked off the stand victorious, with her head held high. But as soon as she was behind the closed doors of a cab, her head and shoulders drooped. Perhaps it was a good thing her company had basically shut down for the rest of the month. She needed time to recover. Since she wasn't needed and didn't want to be there, Lena decided to leave Metropolis after her testimony was given. She was a CEO of the company her family had almost run into the ground, so it wasn't as if anyone questioned her departure. But from the smug look Lillian gave her at the front of the courtroom just before she left, Lena knew her mother was counting it as a victory on her part. Lena told herself she didn't care, that she wasn't the one going to prison for the next several decades, but she didn't quite have the knack for lying like the rest of her family did. Lena's cab took her to the Metropolis airport, and it was there that Lena's day only got worse.
Cancelled? What do you mean cancelled?
I'm sorry, Ms. Luthor, but all flights in and out of National City have been canceled indefinitely, the airport worker told her. There's a large blizzard headed that way, and we don't know when the runways will be cleared.
Can't I get a flight to somewhere closer to it then?
Lena asked.
Central City or Star City? I'll even work with Gotham.
I'm sorry, Ms. Luthor, but almost all seats have been booked, the airport worker told her with a forced smile. With the holidays and all, it's our busiest time of year. I hope you understand.
There must be something,
Lena replied, adopting a harsher tone than she meant to. Her mother's trial had put her more on edge than she realized. I'm sorry, Ms. Luthor, but there isn't anything I can do, the airport worker replied in a tone matching in hostility. The airport worker had been about to ask Lena to leave so she could attend to the growling line behind her. But just before she could, her eyes caught the newsreel on the television behind her. Lena's gaze followed, and her face drooped. It was footage of her at her testifying at her mother's trial. Although the television had been muted, the headline scrolling beneath it said it all. Lunatic Luthor's family reunion in court. Lena whipped her head away from the television and held her head down. She was thankful to have worn her hair down that day, so her face could hide behind a curtain of raven hair. Why hadn't she thought this through better and brought a hat and sunglasses, like every other celebrity did? She had barely had the strength to face her mother today. She definitely didn't have the strength to face judgment, or worse, sympathy from strangers.
Please,
Lena added with a softer tone of desperation and pleading eyes. Let me check with the travel agency, the airport worker said before scrolling and typing away at the computer. Oh, I didn't know we still ran these, but it might work.
What?
Lena asked, perking up slightly. Well, it may be a little out of date, but we do have a Greyhound bus leaving here for National City today, the airport worker explained. I don't know how far it will take you with the upcoming storm, and it will certainly take a bit longer, but it will get you closer to where you need to be.
I'll take it,
Lena said quickly. She hadn't ridden on a bus since maybe ever, but she'd seen them on movies and television shows. She could work it out. How hard could they be? Besides, she hated flying anyway, and this way she could get some work done on the bus. Wonderful, the airport worker said, still clicking away. It leaves in about a half an hour. Just let me print off your ticket and give you a refund, and then you can just make your way down to the end of the airport and follow the signs to the bus depot.
Okay, thank you,
Lena said, reaching for the ticket. It's my pleasure, the airport worker said with the first genuine smile she'd given Lena, even though the sympathy made Lena want to cringe. And Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas,
Lena mumbled. She turned and trudged toward the bus depot, only stopping to buy a gray beanie and large black sunglasses at an airport kiosk. Of all holidays that she wished she wasn't a Luthor, this was the one. While Lena hadn't heard much about the Greyhound bus line in the past several years, she knew that they were still a viable business and still producing and adapting to the modern world like any company. However, the bus she now prepared to board apparently did not get the memo. From the chrome sides, the giant Greyhound on the side, and the inclined roof, Lena would have sworn that the bus had come straight from the 70s or 80s. Still, the driver was courteous and respectful as he took her suitcase and stored it underneath the bus. She had to fight the urge to grimace at the garland and lights strewn along the windows and dash of the bus. She cringed when she realized how much the decorations must clash with the bus's pale blue exterior. Honestly, the amount this country changed and sacrificed all for a season of commercialism astounded her. But after her day, she didn't have the energy to try and fight it. The bus was surprisingly fuller than Lena expected. With the front seats full, Lena climbed up the steps to the middle of the bus, leading to the back, which only made her question the safety of the vehicle. From what she could tell, the seats at least had seatbelts, but that didn't bring her as much comfort as she had hoped. She took a seat towards the back where she prayed fate would pity on her for once today, and keep the seat next to her empty. She dropped her bag and briefcase of files on it for good measure, and it seemed to work. Soon, the bus's engine roared to life and rolled out of the station with Lena alone in her row. For bus's vintage appearance, the bus ride was surprisingly smooth. Much smoother than any plane anyway, and Lena was able to get through her work faster than expected. Yet, unlike a plane, The travel time was considerably longer, especially with all the added stops. And while the aisle lit up as night fell, Lena couldn't bring herself to use the overhead lights. Unlike the people on planes who seemed like arrogant, smelly snobs, these people seemed gentle and kind, despite not ever saying a word to her. The bus line didn't provide eye masks or earplugs like the airplane, and Lena couldn't bring herself to be the cause of their discomfort. So, she put away her files and decided to rest her head against the cool glass of the window. It had been such a long day, and all Lena wanted was to rest. For the first time in months, sleep came easy for Lena. A bit too easy, actually. When Lena woke up, her mouth was dry and eyes were heavy. She squinted against the harsh sun reflecting against the banks of snow outside and looked around. Most of the passengers around her had disappeared. Frantically, she checked her watch and swore aloud. She had slept over an hour past her arrival time. How could she have been so stupid? Why didn't she set an alarm on her phone? This was all her fault. And where even was she? She looked out the window and saw the snowy landscape and assumed it must have been from the blizzard. Apparently, it hadn't been as bad as the airport worker claimed. Or it hadn't hit yet. Oh, this was so bad. And we're coming up on our next stop. The driver's voice crackled over the intercom. Feel free to stretch your legs and grab something to eat. This town is famous for their sticky buns. Lena peered outside her window and saw the quaint small town the bus was now pulling into. She scanned the buildings for a town name and racked her brain for any town close to National City, known for the sticky bun, but came up empty. Maybe the snow had slowed the bus down, so maybe she hadn't missed her stop. Still, there'd be no harm in getting off and asking around. The driver pulled up to the bus depot, and Lena quickly gathered her things and headed out the door. Her feet sank into the snow, and Lena was grateful to have worn her boots rather than her heels. Navigating her way on ice-covered sidewalks in heels seemed like a good way to get a ride in an ambulance rather than a bus. No one else got off the bus for Lena to follow, so she decided to blaze on her own. She trekked her way into the small bus depot, which was quite a generous title once Lena realized as she walked inside. The small, one-room building had one counter, a drink machine, and seemingly doubled as a post office from all the parcels and envelopes overflowing from the bags along the sides. Lena had seen the mailroom at corporate, but she could have sworn the amount of mail in the room outnumbered that place, even on a good day. She had to step over a fallen pile of red and green envelopes that had toppled along the small path between packages and sacks of mail to get to the counter. Either someone was severely behind on their job, or someone in town was very popular. "Sorry, just try to avoid stepping on them," a voice called from behind the counter. "We always get super backed up this time of year." Lena navigated her way to the counter where a man with a large smile and wild brown hair stood. He wore a striped green and red hat on his head that had only added to his elf-like appearance. But Lena shoved that thought down. It may have been the holidays, but that never gave her a reason to compare anyone to an elf.
"Is this the bus depot?"
Lena asked. "Yep," the man smiled. "We handle all transportation, actually, but it's really just bus services mostly. And clearly we double as the post office. Small town compromises and such. We don't typically get a whole lot of visitors anyway outside of the season. I'm Win, by the way, and it's a pleasure to be of service." He flashed a large toothy grin, and Lena instantly found herself craving the fake smile of the airport worker from earlier. At least that one she knew how to handle.
"I'm sorry to bother you, but do you have any buses going to National City today?"
Lena asked, shouldering her bag. Win frowned. "National City?" Win asked.
"Yes."
Lena replied, beginning to get irritated that the elf-dressed man in front of her hadn't even bothered turning on a computer.
"It shouldn't be too far. I just missed my stop. And could you hurry? I'm in a bit of a rush."
"Your bus was supposed to take you to National City?" Win asked slowly, as if he didn't understand what Lena was telling him.
Yes.
Lena bit out.
I missed my stop. Now, can you please get me a ticket so I can get back there? And I need you to hurry. I still need to get my suitcase off the bus.
You mean that bus? Wynne asked, pointing outside the window to the Greyhound that had already began pulling away.
No!
She tore off behind her, knocking over several stacks of packages and sacks of letters in the process, but she didn't care. Her clothes and belongings were still on board. She held her beanie tight against her head as she attempted to chase after the bus in the ankle-deep snow. But the closest she ever got were the fumes of gray exhaust billowing out of the back. That didn't stop her from screaming and waving her arms around, though, drawing attention from just about everyone on the street. Oh, and if her mother could see her now. But unfortunately for her, a car didn't seem to see her, though. At least not until it was too late. Lena heard the horn and slow of tires braking against snow, but that still didn't get her feet to move. All she could do was close her eyes in a feeble attempt to brace for impact. She just didn't expect the impact to come from the side. A force rammed into her side, throwing her face first into a snowbank with an added weight resting on top of her, forcing her further down. She was too shocked to breathe at first. But as soon as she was pulled out of the bank just seconds later, she frantically gulped down breaths of air. Her face had gone numb from the snow, and her cheeks now burned against the air. "Are you all right?" a gentle voice asked her. With how much brighter the world now looked, Lena knew she had lost her sunglasses, which was most unfortunate, as she now stared straight into a blindingly bright light. She squinted against the light, and after a moment, once her vision returned, she realized it wasn't a light, but the blonde hair of a woman. A blue-eyed, rosy-cheeked, attractive woman who currently held her in her arms. Despite just receiving a face full of snow, Lena's throat and mouth instantly went dry.
What happened?
Lena croaked, unable to take her green eyes off the woman's blue. "You ran out in the road in front of a car," the woman explained with a slight smile. "I pushed you out of the way before you were hit."
"Oh,"
Lena said, her gaze falling as her mind started to work again.
"Wait, my bus!"
Lena started to sit up, but the woman held her back, most likely fearful that the raven-haired woman would run back out into the road again. "Whoa there," the blonde said. "That bus is long gone. You're not going to be able to catch it. Just take it easy."
"Well, then I need a ticket for the next one,"
Lena retorted, no longer flustered but annoyed that this woman treated her like she was a horse than a woman.
"I need to get back to National City as soon as possible."
National City? That's going to be quite the ride.
"What are you talking about?"
Lena asked, her eyes narrowing.
"I just missed my stop by an hour. It shouldn't take me any more than that to get back."
"Well, National City is about a 2-day drive from here."
"What?"
Lena's eyes widened.
"That's impossible. My ticket was for National City."
She paused for a moment and looked around, her fear quickly doubling, her heart racing.
"Wait, where even am I?"
"Well, North Pole, of course."
We did this! You've been listening to PODFIC Theater, presented to you by the What About That team. Stay tuned for the next chapter.
And wherever you are, whatever you're doing, happy holidays.